Alright, welcome to a new Visual Studio project with Eric Severy. What I'm going to do is look at how we can control the appearance of our form by taking advantage of object properties. This is a beginning level tutorial for C#. We're going to start by creating a new project. We're going to make a basic Windows form application, and I'm just going to call it Resize Demo Project. I'm going to probably not even keep this. It's just to show how we can control some properties. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a button, and I'm going to use the alignment guides to place the button so it's a nice space away from the top and the sides. People at Microsoft have researched to make sure these are nice and friendly. I'm going to add two buttons just because I think it's more interesting this way and for where this is going to go. Alright, so we have a couple buttons in here. We can just quickly save and compile and run the program, and we can see we now have a form. The buttons do not do anything because we haven't asked them to, but we can see when we change the size of our form it does not look good. Alright, so we want to make it so that when we make the form wider, I want the buttons to become wider with it. I want them to remain very similar to when we had started. So we're going to start looking at some button properties. If you're curious about the name of a property, there's a property window on the right hand side for me. This may be placed somewhere different based on your preferences. Looking here, we can see all sorts of properties. I happen to know which one we're looking for. It's going to be width, which actually is not showing up here, but it's under size, width. There we go. But I want this to be a dynamic width. Alright, so we're actually going to change the property by using an event. So when we resize our form, that's actually an event we can wait for. But we only listen for and we only wait for the events that we care about. So I'm going to click on the form to make sure the form 1 is selected, and we can very easily do it under the properties here. I can go and select form, or I can just click on the background of the form. They both work. As long as we see form highlighted here under the properties menu, we're happy. Next, we want to click on the lightning bolt, which stands for events. We're going to wait for some sort of lightning event to happen. And we want to resize. Sometimes these are listed alphabetically, like in mine. Other times they're listed by category. I happen to know the name of the event I'm looking for is Resize. And there are three events. There's Resize, Resize Begin, and Resize End. If I do Resize, it's going to keep doing it. Everything's going to be dynamic. The event's going to keep happening every time I change the size. Resize Begin will only happen when I start to resize. And Resize End will only happen when I finish resizing. And we can kind of look at the difference between these in a little bit. When I click on this arrow, I see there's nothing there, which means there are no events. I'm not surprised because this was a new project. If I double click this little box to the right of Resize, it's going to create a Resize event and bring me to the code. So you can see here we have form 1 resize. And form 1 resize is the name of this method, and it's a method that takes two arguments, the sender object and the event argument, E. I'm not actually going to use those information for this object. I'm just going to change the size of the button as it's being resized. And this should be simple enough. So I'm going to say button1 dot width. If you notice, I did misspell it, but it corrected when I hit enter. Be sure everything is spelled correctly. And I'm going to try having the width of the button be the width of the form. Now this is a form object that we're inside of. We're inside the object form 1. And the form 1 object has name form 1. But I want to make sure that as I resize this object, the button is the width of this form 1. So I'm going to say this, oops, missed the T, T-H-I-S. So this is kind of a shorthand for this object, whatever object you're in. And I'm going to go this width. Once again, I'm misspelling it. I'm only typing WI, but I can see width is highlighted here. So when I hit enter, it's going to spell everything correctly. So the width of the button 1 is going to be the width of the form. I should be able to quickly build the program and see how everything looks. Beautiful, except I see the button is changing size because the text is moving, but it's going off the edge. And the reason is the width of the form starts here, and the width of the button starts here. So this means this button is probably going just a little bit beyond the end. So I need to make the button a little bit smaller. And I'm going to do that by paying attention to the offset. So if we just open it up fresh, we can see there's a little extra on the right and a little extra on the left. And that difference between the button and the difference between the form is the offset. So we're going to keep track of that with a variable. So I'm going to create int button offset. I don't know what value to give it. I am going to add some comments so I don't forget what this button offset is later. The button offset is the difference between the width of the form. Oops, let me spell that correctly. And the width of the button. Alright, so here I'm commenting what this button offset variable means. It's always good to have a comment to describe some stuff. And then when we're creating our form is when I'm going to define the offset. So here in the form, in the object initializer is where I'm going to define it. Now the first thing that happens when we create the form is we initialize the components, this line of code here. And with that line of code, it adds the buttons, it adds the form, it builds everything. We cannot figure that out until everything's been built. So I'm going to say, once everything's been put there, we can find the button offset we want. So button offset equals the width of the form, which remember is this dot width, minus button 1 dot width. I could have used button 2, I suppose, but I'm just going to go with button 1. And then when we resize, instead of going with the width, I'm going to do the width minus the button offset. Sorry, button offset. There we go. Auto completion helps save some programming. So now when we run the program, everything looks fine to begin with. And as we change the size, things look fine too, even as we go smaller. So let's update that for both buttons. So button 2 dot width equals the, oops, sorry, that should be an equals this dot width minus button offset. So now both buttons should be good. Let's play with it and see if we're happy with everything. Pretty much, if you go real fast, you might see a little unusual stuff. But I know it's a problem now. If I make it too small, it doesn't look good. So I'm going to fix that. But first, I want to know the size of the frame. So I want to know the width and the height of the frame. And I'm just going to display that in button 1. And I'm going to do that while I'm resizing. So I'm going to just say button1.text equals some text. So when I'm resizing, I'm going to set the text there. And what I want is I'm going to want to have the width and the height displayed in the button text. So instead of the word width here, I'm going to have the button width. Now with string variables, we can use a plus sign to put them together. So I'm going to have the parentheses, and then between these two plus signs, I'm going to put this dot width plus, now we're going to have a comma to separate it, make things look good. To keep everything on one line, I'm actually going to just hit enter and do this dot height. I'm going to erase the word height here because we'll display the number instead. And this is basically what I want to show. So let's see if everything shows up the way we want. So it doesn't show until I resize. And you'll see when I click, it doesn't show up until I actually start to move. So we can see 174 is the most narrow I can get. Although maybe that's more narrow than we want. Maybe we want to make about 200 the smallest size. But we'll do small stuff later. So we basically want something to be like maybe 200 by 120 to be the smallest size. If I go any smaller, it doesn't look good. So 200 by 120 is what we want. Now we don't use the program at all to do that. Well, we use Visual Studio. We don't do anything in properties bar on the right, and we're going to edit the properties. I'm going to make this a little bigger and easier to see, and I'm going to look through the properties, and I see there's a property here called minimum size, and it's 0, 0. Well, if you remember, I had found the width to be 120. Was it? Or 200 for the width and 120 for the height. I think that was right. Let's double check. Maybe I forgot already. So when we run the program, I'm going to try to resize. Yep, the smallest width is 200 and the smallest height is 120. So now we can see it's not going to go any smaller than that. And okay, I lost my mouse for just a second. So our smallest width is 200, our smallest height is 120. All right, so that looks pretty good. We're pretty happy. If you want to set the maximum size, you can do that here. You can set just a maximum width or just a maximum height if you'd like. And you can do the same for the minimum. So there's a lot of customization we can do. And this program is pretty good, but I want to show you it can get a little bit more complicated. And where I think it gets complicated is if we want the buttons to be side by side. So I'm just going to use, notice the nice purple line showing that they're aligned evenly. When they're aligned evenly and I run this program, it's going to work a little differently. Once I try to do the offsets, you can quickly see they override. The problem is the width of the buttons aren't necessarily proportional to what we want. What we want to do is we want to divide the form in half and think about it that way. So let's do that real quick. So I'm gonna write a quick method to get, so private int, and this method is gonna get the button width that we want, right? So get button width, or maybe get new button width, based on our form size. Make sure to have an open and closing bracket. Alright, so what we're going to return is we're going to return some values. So we're going to return, I guess, the width of the form, so this.width. And we only want to look at half of the form because the button will be living in half the form. But we also want to subtract off some button offset that will take care of how wide the button should be. And this button offset is going to be a little bit more complicated than before. And it also should take into consideration the space between the buttons. So when we come up here, this button offset is based on how they're laid out. Instead, what I'm going to do is, instead of going with the width of the button and the width of the form, this button offset is simply going to, I'm going to maybe give it an offset of 20. I'm going to just create a value for it. So when we resize, the button is going to be offset by 20. When we run our program, we'll see, alright, this is not working exactly how I want. So let's see if we can figure out what's going on. In form1.cs, I'm just going to pull him straight down, save, run. Okay, so we're just subtracting 20 from it. So we have to, oh, that's what I didn't do. This line of code, instead of using the offset the way it was, we need to get new button width, and that is a method. I'm going to do that here too. Get new button width. Make sure it's a method. Now when we run it, everything hopefully will be a little better. Alright, so the button it looks like it's halfway there. Button 2 should be moving based on halfway. So what we're going to do is we need to figure out the location of button 2. If you don't know the location variable, you can look through all the properties to figure out what it is, or you could try to find it in code. I often just try to find it in code. So I'm going to change the location. Now if I don't know what the location is called, when I do button 2 period, I can scroll through all the properties and methods that are part of the button class. Maybe position. Nope. Okay, so it's location. When I hit enter, we get a location. It's also important to note that when I'm typing location, I get a helper to the right which says point control location. So location has a data type of point, so we need to give it a point. So this location has to be some sort of point. Because point is an object, we need to create a new point object and assign it to the location. And really nice in Visual Studio is when we start creating a new point, we get a little menu telling us, well, we can create an empty point, we can create a point with an integer, which is the width, we can use a size, or we can use the int x and the int y. And this is what I'm going to do. And for the starting position of the point, I am just going to do the width of the form divided by 2, and that's going to be the x value. And the y for the point is going to be the same. It's going to be whatever, when we look at the point 2 location, one of the location properties is y. Oh, looks like it's a capital Y. So the point for my location is going to be 1/2 the width of the form, and I'm not going to change the y. So the y location is not changing, only the width. And it's just being set to be the halfway point. So you can see when I'm adjusting it, it's at about the halfway point. Now I'm going to align my buttons so everything looks happy. So I'll pull it up, wait for the blue lines. At this point, button 2 is really decided only based on the y. I could place button 2 in a really bad position, and as soon as I start resizing, it will look good. Of course, it doesn't look good at the beginning, so I will make it look relatively good at the beginning. I could make everything perfect, but you can see here, oh, the sizes are just a little off on the points, but you can see the spaces between everything looks pretty good. You would have to manipulate the numbers and make everything perfect. Oops. I need to let go. Perfect there. All right. Sorry, I'm just a stickler. I want to make sure that everything is aligned as well as can be hoped for. And now they all look perfectly aligned. All right, so we've kind of seen how we can adjust our buttons to make the form look good. If you're going to be using a lot of control elements, I recommend that you not do this in code and you try to use some sort of design layout. But for simple things like just having 2 buttons side by side, this can be a relatively easy way to go in and edit how you want them laid out relative to each other. Just do a little bit of mathematics, a little algebra, not too much, a little geometry, and I think you can make everything work. For the most part, I really want to show in this bit of a tutorial how you can access properties of the button, how you can create new methods for your object, and just in general how we can start hacking a way to make our program to behave the way we want. So I hope this was useful to you, and that's about where I'm going to stop for today. Thank you.